Just suppose with me for a moment that you're in great physical and mental shape. Nothing wrong with you at all. And you find out beyond any shadow of a doubt you only have 1 week to live. How would you spend that week? What would be your priorities? Thank you for tuning in today. I hope this message will be helpful. Our passage today is Luke 19, beginning with verse 28. After Jesus had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. As he approached Bethphage and Bethany on the hill called Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tied up there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you what you're doing or why you're doing it, tell them the Lord needs it." Those who were sent ahead went and found it just as he had told them. And as they were there untying the colt, its owner asked them, "Why are you untying the colt?" They replied, "The Lord needs it." They brought it to Jesus. They threw their cloaks on the colt and put Jesus on it. He went along. People spread their cloaks on the road. When he came near the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully praising God in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed are peace in heaven and glory to the highest." Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." "I'll tell you," he replied, if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. Wow. That was an amazing ride. Now, I try, because I know so many of us have been in church most of our lives, the majority of us have, and I try to bring something new to a day like today. It's very hard to do that. But here's the question I want to ask you. I've had this thought many times. I've had people say this to me many times. What are the most common things people say in their last minutes they have on earth as they're getting ready to enter in the Lord's presence? What are their regrets? The most common regret out there is they spent too much time working and not enough time with family. That's the most common. There are other regrets that folks have, but I don't want to do that today. I want to ask a different question. Let's suppose for a minute, just play with me on this, if you will, that you're in the peak of your health. You're just absolutely in great physical shape. Your heart's working great. Everything's good, right? And you find out from your doctor you have 1 week to live. And there's no doubt you're going to die in 1 week. No doubt at all. What would you do? Quite a question, is it not? Now, I've said many times the best way we can live is to live in mind and understanding that we might have 1 week to live or 1 day to live. That's the best way to live. Not fearfully, but expectantly and faithfully. I remember Lou Holtz's great speech, many of his great speeches, where he talks about the values that he has. And that was do the best you can every day. That was bottom line for him. And I think that's something to be said for that. But what would we be doing differently if we knew definitively we had 1 week to live? Now, let me say this to you as bluntly as I can. As a minister, I've been with people who were told they're in the peak of their health and they died within a month. And I can name one that happened here at this church when I was here before. They go to the doctor, they think they're doing well, and they find out 2 days later they're going to have 5 bypasses. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. But if you knew definitively, no doubt about it, you had 1 week to live, what would happen? Well, first of all, I would take time for compassion. Jesus said, as Jesus and his disciples were leaving Jericho, a large crowd followed him. 2 blind men were sitting by the roadside, and when they heard that Jesus was going by, they shouted, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." That was probably in the last week of Jesus' life when that miracle occurred. We think about that, having compassion. I know that the song, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. But love always manifests itself with compassion. Is that true? Love is an ambiguous kind of idea for most of us. It's not real tangible. Love works its way out in our lives by how we treat other people and how we live, and the things we do, the values we place on things, as an example. That's how love manifests itself. Isn't that true? It is. In fact, Jesus said, or John, in 1 John 3:16, which I think is a parallel passage to John 3:16, he says this. He said, "Let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth." Wow. That's putting it right where we live, is it not? I would take time for compassion. Well, I don't have to wait to that verdict of my end day to have compassion. Compassion is a measurable thing. Compassion lives out its idea, so to speak, in how we view and help other people. Having compassion for that poor lost soul sitting on the street corner in downtown Wilson at 8 o'clock in the morning drinking a bottle of wine, as opposed to having anger or rage. Understanding that person is trapped in a lifestyle that we could have been there too, except for the grace of God, and I don't want to stop there. It's not just the grace of God, it's the grace of God and decisions we've made, and the fact that we have been blessed by having families that their values were different than the values that poor guy was raised with. Does that make sense? None of us are exempt from that. Well, the next thing I would try to do is I would try to take time for some celebration. Celebration. I tell you, he replied, "If they keep quiet, the stones will cry out." I had a church member one time that, I know this is going to shock you. I had a church member one time I thought was a little weird. Can you imagine? Anybody ever met a church member that's a little weird? Well, she was a lot weird by my definition. And she hosted her own reception for her funeral a couple years before she died. And she rented the convention center, what used to be the convention center at the Holiday Inn in Rocky Mount, and had probably 300 people there. She paid for this meal. She wanted to hear what people were going to say about her before she died. And of course, in that environment, everybody was saying good stuff. The food was really great. But I thought, that's not totally a bad idea. Because the way we perceive ourselves in this world and why we're here and where we're headed has an awful lot to do with how we value other people. Celebration is a good thing. Celebration is a good thing. But what are we going to celebrate? Wow. I celebrate the gift of life. I celebrate the gift of church, the gift of family. I celebrate all kinds of fun stuff. I used to joke in one of my churches, I had this lady who was great. She was a piece of work. She would greet me every week with some criticism at the door. If I wore a tie she didn't like, she'd tell me about it. If I said something in a sermon she didn't care for, she'd tell me about it. And I love her. When Hurricane Floyd came through, she lost everything. And I bought her a computer and set it up in her new place. And from then on, she thought I was made of gold. And she wasn't wrong. Just kidding. Then I had this other guy in the church. And by the way, if she ever smiled at anything I said in church, I knew I'd gone way too far. Then I had this other guy in the church, bookends kind of a guy. If he didn't laugh 3 or 4 times during the service, I knew I'd been too serious that day. And I'd kind of glance between those two to measure where I was in the sermon. Occasionally I do that, not every time. But the celebration part of our life is real. In some ways, from my point of view, the image that I have of celebration, and I mean this in a spiritual sense, don't get me wrong. I mean this in a deeply spiritual sense, is how I feel as a kid, the kid in me, on Christmas morning. You get me? Celebrating the Lord that way every day. His goodness, His mercy, His grace, the fact that His love is so rich and so free, and God is so grace-filled and mercy-filled. When I go back and look at the Old Testament, look at how many times the Israelites did things they should have been punished for that God said, I give you mercy. We often focus on the Old Testament as being a book of wrath, right? Don't kind of do that sometimes? Old Testament's full of wrath, New Testament's full of love. I don't think that's fair. Because you've not seen wrath until you read the book of Revelation. And you've not seen love until you see God opening the doors for anybody and everybody to get on the ark to be spared. That ark was the ark that when the flood occurred, the doors were open wide for over 100 years. And how many times does the nation of Israel cry out for help from God that God denies them help? I don't see it. God's mercy is rich and real. Time for celebration. There's also time for evaluation. One of the things that's been a joy during this 4-month journey of mine is evaluation. Does my life reflect what I believe? Am I living what I say I believe? Evaluation is a good thing. Now, there are several, I think, back when I was in high school, were there 9 grading periods back then? Does anybody remember?
6.
How many?
6.
6? Man, I used to hate report card day. And it wasn't because of my grades necessarily. It was because there was one thing they always checked: behavior. And often my teachers did not understand my sense of humor. Can you imagine that? Evaluation. Another time of the day I used to hate growing up. I was raised in a generation where our signal to go home was when the street lights came on. And we lived in a neighborhood in Tarboro. Tells you I wasn't born there. Tarba. We lived in a neighborhood in Tarba that everybody was everybody's parent. And if any of the neighbors were correcting me and I disrespected them, my daddy treated me like I disrespected him. That's how I was raised. I used to joke we hated 5 o'clock because that's when the phone started ringing. But the fact of the matter is, evaluation is a good thing. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. He got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist. After he poured water in the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him, he came to Simon Peter and said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter. "No, you will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "And unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Then Lord Peter. So Peter asked here. Simon Peter replied, "Not just my feet, my hands, my head as well." Can you imagine in that moment, Jesus taking the form of a servant, getting a basin out, knowing that he was going to stand alone. None of these disciples were going to hang by him during this time of need. None of them. They all ran for cover. Peter, you're going to deny me. No, not so, Lord. And what does Jesus? You remember the passage when Jesus says to Peter, "You're going to deny me," and Peter says, "I'll never deny you." What is Jesus' response to that statement? Get thee behind me, Satan. Because Satan had planted a lie in Jesus' and Peter's heart. Never doubt the fact that God said through Jesus, we are to wash our other brother's feet. Some churches actually practice that almost as a sacrament. We see it more as symbolic. What does that mean? That means we are called not to be served, but to serve. There are no menial tasks in any church for anyone. Every task we call, every task out there is important. And we are all called to serve, not to be served. I will take time for connection. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place where he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation," he withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him, and being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. The crisis moment was real. How's that relevant to what I'm saying here? None of us can live this journey successfully by ourselves. We need to be in community. We need to be in small groups. We need to be meeting with people of like faith to grow in our journey, our walk. Speaking of that, Bible study will resume next month. We also need to take time for reconciliation. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup my Father has given me?" Wow. Reconciliation. I've had numerous experiences with folks who hadn't talked to relatives in years. I find that very, very sad. I had an argument with a buddy in seminary. Jerry was his name. We didn't speak for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, I'm going, what am I mad about? I didn't even remember what the issue was. So I called Jerry up and said, "Jerry, what are we upset about?" He said, "I don't know. What was it?" And that's how childish we can be. I said, many times people live their lives, if they're holding grudges, it's almost like this. I didn't start it. It's not my fault. He knows where I live. Wow. What a hard-headed way to live. Reconciliation. Think about this for a second. We were strangers and aliens from God, and He sent His Son into the world so that we might be reconciled to Him. How can we not live reconciled lives with other people? But we don't. We often let little things fester up, and ignore it, fester up, ignore it. And before long, we play a game, a psychological game. It's called nihilism. It's like that person never lived. We cut them off completely. And on this Palm Sunday, if you're thinking of someone that you've done that with, I encourage you to figure out how to fix it. Let's pray together. Thank you for tuning in to Horns Church today. If this message has been helpful, feel free to give us a call at 252-237-4616. We'll be glad to talk with you about this or anything else related to your spiritual journey. God bless you and have a great week.